This week we'll be looking at adding new Unity scene functionality through game objects and scripts to our Ink stories. You can see right now I've got the basic demo scene open. I've got my scene controller here, and it is set to reference my whack-a-mole story from last week. I'm going to start out by creating a new scene. I'm going to go to File, Save As, select my Scenes folder, and I'm going to call this My Ink Scene, just so we don't make any changes to the demo scene in case we need to go back to it for reference later. So now I'm here, I'm in my Ink scene, and I've got all the same stuff that was in the demo. My scene controller still referencing my whack-a-mole asset. So now I'm going to make some changes to my whack-a-mole story to make it a little more immersive or a little more interactive for the player. So I'm going to double click the whack-a-mole asset. The Ink story opens in Ink, in Inky I mean. And so here, what we've got, we're entering our knot. We've got a couple of different sequences and shuffles that it goes through to give some different content to the player as they're going through the story. They have different options, and every time that they click one, it sends them back to the beginning of the knot, where potentially it chooses one of the wrong, the wrong answers, one of the misses, or potentially it chooses the winning answer and we get the mole. So in order to make this a little more interactive and to demonstrate how we can utilize some of the advanced Ink functionality like variables and how those can interact with our Unity scene, we're going to go ahead and we're going to count the number of times that it takes the player to get to a win. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new variable, var. We're going to call this numClicks. And we're going to set that value equal to 0 at the start. And so now I can see every time that the player clicks, we send them back to the beginning of this knot. And so what I want to do is when they click, we want to increase the value of our numClicks variable. And there's a few different ways that we can do this, but I think what will actually be the most elegant way to do it is we're going to create our own little knot function that's just responsible for increasing the number of clicks and then sending the player back to the start. So I'm going to create a new knot, and I'm going to call this increase numClicks. And inside of this knot, what we're going to do is we're going to say that this variable, so we reference it with the tilde, we're going to say numClicks plus plus. So that will increase the value on numClicks by 1 each time we run through this knot. And after we increase that, we need to send the player back to the whack-a-mole knot like we did originally when they clicked it. And so then the last thing we need to do is, instead of sending the player to whack-a-mole immediately, we need to send the player through our increase numClicks function, which then will send them back to the start. So I'm going to go ahead and paste in here this increase numClicks function. So now they click here, we send them to this knot, we increase the numClicks variable, and then we send them back to the whack-a-mole entry point. And what we can do here, just in order to display that this is working, I will, at the end here, when the player gets to the aha, got him stage, we will print actually, you know what? Even before then, I can even do this here. I can do this inside of our numClicks knot. I will have the console or the story print out numClicks equals and then the value, the current value of numClicks. And so now we can preview this functionality right in here to make sure that our variable is working properly. So I'm going to restart the story. Click the top left. You can see it printed out, it increased numClicks from 0 to 1, and then printed that out into my story here. I can go ahead and click again, and I got them on the second time, and you can see that variable's increasing. Everything looks like it's working well inside of my story. Now, that's not the most engaging, but it is, at least we've got a variable now that we're tracking, and I'm going to go ahead and remove this from the story so that it doesn't get printed out. We're still increasing the value each time, and that's still running through. Okay, we can see that the Ink story has updated here inside of Unity. There's our new code. And so now what we're going to do is we need a way to display that variable not in the scene itself, or not as part of the ink story, but as part of our Unity scene. And so what we're going to do to do that, we're going to add a new canvas object. So from our game object UI canvas, we're going to then add a new text field to display this. So I have my canvas item selected that I just created. I can go to game object UI text mesh pro or text. I like the text mesh pro. It's a very good asset. More options in terms of formatting your text. It will prompt you, if you haven't already put it into your project, it will prompt you to import, which I've just done. And you can see it brought in a couple of assets. You can see my text mesh pro directory now inside of my assets. That was just imported by clicking that button. And you can see it went ahead and created this text mesh pro asset on a text mesh pro game object. And so we have, it says new text. It popped up here in my scene view as well. And so what we're going to do is we're going to move this out of the way a little bit. So we're going to affect the rect transform of this text object. You can see the canvas itself takes up this whole square. You know, it's a screen space overlay canvas. So it kind of lives within the space of our game view. I'm going to set the rect transform to have a pivot and anchor point in the top left. You can see this is for me on a Mac, I'm doing an Option Shift click to set both the pivot and the position at the same time to the top left. If I did it to the top right, you'll see I can move over there, move down there. We can set it back to the center. So easy way to through this fly out window or pop up window to set the values. You can also do it manually through here, setting your different pivot points, your min and max anchor points, adjusting the width, things like that, the height, all of that. And down here for our text asset, we've got some alignment options, center align, right align. You can see the text here updates when I move this around a little bit, can align it to the bottom, all of that. So for now, we're going to put it to the top, we're going to put it to the left. We've got our new text here, and we can call this, we can rename this game object. We can call this num clicks text, something like that. So now we need a way to update the value of our text field with the variable value from numclicks. And so the way we're going to do that is we're going to add a new script onto this game object that's listening for value changes to that variable in the ink scene. So to do this, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new directory for my scripts to keep my project organized. I'm going to create a new folder. Where'd it go? Assets, create folder. There we go. We're going to call this scripts. And there's, let's see, I'm going to click my numclicks text game object. I'm going to go to add component, and we'll add a new component. This will generate a new script for us when we type in the name of this. I'm going to call this numclicks observer. And you can see if I hit new script, or if I hit the enter button, it will create a new script, add it to this game object. Here it is, numclicks observer. It by default just adds it into the root of my assets folder. I would like to keep it organized. I'm going to go ahead and drag it into my scripts directory, and then I'm going to go ahead and open this up here. So here's our default Unity mono behavior script. So again, a mono behavior is a script that goes on a game object. You can see it, the public class numclicks observer, so it titled it based off of what I titled the component. And it brought in some basic Unity packages, and it gives us our couple of our core Unity functions, the start function and the update function, and a little bit of comment about what these functions are for, when they're called, and all of that. So we're going to be changing this script around, and we also need to take a look at the basic ink example. So this script is attached to our scene controller object. This is part of that demo scene, right? This basic Ink example script that has the Ink JSON reference, Canvas reference, etc., and some prefab references. We're going to be utilizing part of the script. So there's a bunch of stuff going on here in terms of basically creating the buttons and populating the text into the view. But one of the most important things, at least for us, is this onCreateStory event, which is made available as a public static event action on the basic Ink example. So in order to listen to this event from our numclicks observer, what we're going to do is we're going to add in the awake function. This awake function is kind of like the start function, except it gets called even earlier. It gets called as soon as the game object becomes aware in the scene, as soon as it is active in the scene. And so in our awake function, what we're going to say is basic Ink example, so we're referencing this class, dot onCreateStory, so we're referencing now the class, and then this static event that exists on the basic Ink example class. And for events, the syntax to add a listener, you say plus equals, and then the name of your listener. So in this case, we're going to write a listener called onCreateStory listener. And I can go ahead and add that function here, onCreateStory listener. And there we go. I think I need okay, that's that. And let's see, am I missing? Oh, okay. I think I have a signature. Oh, you can see here. As part of the signature for onCreateStory, we need to accept a story asset. So I need to change this parameter to say story. And now, let's see, what do I have going on here? No overload matches delegate. onCreateStory, event action story. That seems strange. Why is this onCreateStory listener? onCreateStory. Why is this yelling at me? Maybe I need to, this might be yelling at me because I haven't recompiled this script, and so maybe it doesn't know about this yet. Let's see if I just go back to my Unity instance, allow it to compile. Let's see what we get here. Nope, still doesn't like it. Okay, well, let's check out somebody else. I'm going to click this basic example editor. Here we are. onCreateStory. Static void. Let's see, I wouldn't have expected that to be necessary, but let's see if I run back here. Okay, here we go. Here's my issue. That was tricky. So you can see here the class that it brought in automatically, an Ink parsed story class. But actually, if I look at the example editor, who's doing the same thing, they're also listening for this onCreateStory event. You can see this is an Ink runtime story class. So this actually needs to be changed. I don't know how that happened, but that got in there. Going to go ahead and import my Ink runtime story. And there we go. All of my errors go away. Whew, that was not too bad at least. And so another thing we should do, we've added this listener. We should always be sure to remove our listeners when we don't need them anymore. So the onDestroy function, also a built-in Unity function. This gets called on any game object when that object is destroyed. So when you exit play mode, for instance, this function will get called. And it's always a good idea to remove your listeners so that they're not hanging around creating memory leaks and things like that. So that's just with the minus equals operator, and that will remove this. This will add it every time we enter play mode and the game object becomes active. This will remove it every time we exit play mode and the game object is destroyed. So now within our story listener, what we want to do is we want to set up an observation function on a variable. So one of the things that we can do with our Ink story class, we can say story, and this is again this instance of this class. So we're saying story.observe variable, and we can see we have to supply the variable name, and then we supply an observer function. Well, our variable name, as you might remember, was numclicks, and our observer function, we're going to call this observe numclicks. And we need to now create that function, which is has a return type of void. This function is called observe numclicks, and the signature for this, when you have this variable observation, I think, let's see if it puts it here, story variable observer. Doesn't show it exactly, so I can just tell you what this takes in is a string of the variable name and the object, which is the new value of that variable. So we are now observing changes to the numclick variable, and what we're going to want to do when we observe a change is edit the value of our numclicks text field. So what we need to do next is get a reference to this numclicks text field component, the TextMesh Pro component. We need a reference to that inside of our observer script. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new reference. We're going to call this public TextMesh Pro UGUI. This is the class specifically that gets added to game objects for the TextMesh Pro, and we're going to call this text field. When we go back into our Unity scene after adding that, you'll see we're going to see that reference here. So because we made this a public reference, or alternatively, if you make it a private but serialized reference, you say serialized field private, and I'll just, for example's sake, I'm going to copy this and call this private text field, just so you can see how this works. When we come back in here, you'll see that text field, even though it was private, we do also have a reference to that, specifically because we said serialized field. If we remove that, you will no longer see the private text field reference here. You specifically have to serialize it, or it can be a public field. Public fields are auto-serialized by the Unity editor. Okay, so we've got our reference now, and when we have a change to numclicks, what we're going to want to do is update the text field. So we're going to write a new function called void update text, and it's going to take a string, which is our text, and we're going to say text field, so referencing our TextMesh Pro component, our reference up here at the top, text field dot text equals text. And so now this, again, this text is referencing this. I could even call this, I could change this, say, new text or something like that to make it a little clearer, a little less confusing. So now inside of our observe numclicks, we want to call update text. We already know the variable name is numclicks. It's the only variable I'm working with. And I know that my new value needs to be passed here. So I say new value to string. And that's because this value is coming in as an object. We know that our text field requires a string, and so we're going to do that conversion here. And let's see, so now we've got this component all linked up. It's listening for the numclicks variable, and every time it changes, it's going to update the text to that value. So let's give this a play and see what happens. Okay, so off the bat, you can see it still says new text by default. And if we look back at our Ink assets, that actually makes sense because at the beginning of the game, it hasn't changed yet, right? The observation that we're doing is when the variable changes, not when the variable is set. So actually, this variable hasn't changed at all. It still is just set to 0. When I click one of these buttons to hit the top left, let's see, we forgot to assign it. That's why. Okay, so I'm gonna end my play session, go back to my game object, and here, of course, I opened up this reference, but I never set it. So what we do is we can just drag our game object that has the the Text Mesh Pro reference, or alternatively, you can even drag this component. I believe you can drag the component in here, or if you drag the game object, it automatically recognizes the component that you're looking for on that game object. So now we've set this text field. If I click it, you can see it highlights the game object that the component is on. You see it bounces every time I click on it. So now we'll play this again. And again, you can still see new text to start. I'm going to click a button, top left. And there we go. Num clicks has increased from 0 to 1. We observed that change in the variable, updated the text to the new value, and there it is displayed in the top left there. And if I click another one, it'll go to 2, end of story. Okay. I click restart. Again, notice the variable hasn't changed again yet, even though I restarted. So it still says 2 in the top left. After I click something, there it is back to 1. Oh, first try. Okay, end of story. So now one other thing that we'd probably like to do is to set this to 0 at the beginning of the game. And so what we're going to do is in our create story listener function, we can go ahead. So after the story is created, the variable has been created. It's been initialized with its value of 0. And so at this point in time, in addition to saying that we want to observe the variable, we can also update the text with that variable value. So I'm going to go ahead and say update text. And now in order to get that value, I say story.variable state. And the name of my variable is numclicks. And again, toString, because I know that value needs to be turned into a string to be passed to my update text function. And so now if I go back to here, when we play the story, I should now see a 0. There we go. Numclicks is now 0 at the beginning of each game. I can select an answer, answer. Oh, am I going to make it? Okay, 4 times. End of story, restart, and we reset back to 0 each time that we hit that story creation listener. And so here you have it. This is how we can interact, have additional interactions between our ink stories and our Unity scenes. And you can do all sorts of things with this. You can imagine that clicking these different options could play different sound effects. If I hit the mole or missed the mole, it could trigger a specific sound effect to play inside of Unity. Or the background image. We could use, on our canvas, we could create a image component. And that image component, I'll turn that into the top right, there we go. This image could change every time. It could be, different things that you can try to whack the mole with, right? Maybe we could have a frying pan or a mallet or whatever, a rolling pin. So there's all sorts of things we can do here. We could even, at a certain point, if you're interested, you can look into creating a 3D scene. You could have a character that is being given directions and moving around in the background based off of the scene choices being made here in your story. So lots of different options. I definitely encourage you to explore, try out different things and really have fun and enjoy.